Welcome, one and all, back to the Viper's Nest, where we're going to talk about obscure lore in just a minute. But first, I want to update you on what's going on with my channel. So I finished my playthrough of Star Wars Squadrons, finally, and I started another new project. The problem was the file sizes for these projects they're getting a bit hefty, if you know what I mean. And my shitty backwoods internet just can't quite handle it. Like, I started to upload the first episode of my new project, and then I went to bed, and, wake up 8 hours later, check on it, it's only 35% done. Which, that's just not good. Like, I've considered letting it keep going, but it also just completely chokes my internet connection, so I can't do anything else during that time, so it just sucks. So, here's my plan. Here's what I'm thinking I'm going to do, hopefully not jinxing myself. I'm going to alternate days. I'm going to go back to playing Sunless Skies one day, and then I will do my new project on the day after that. And on the day I film my new project, I'll, play for an hour or two, whatever, and then hopefully utilize the rest of the day and try to put together a proper, beginning of episode Captain's Log for Sunless Skies, finish that up, so then the next day, when I get my chance, I can just hop right on the computer and start playing without having to deal with prep work. That's my hope. And then, when I hopefully go out to my friend Noodle's house on Friday, where he has absolutely godlike internet, I can just take the videos of the larger file size and just upload them en masse on Friday. So we'll check back on that at the end of the week and see how well that plan has actually worked. So, moving on to the actual lore of the day. We're going to talk about a good old friend of mine, the Nemesis T-type. Or, Nimmy, as some of us call him, or Big Nim, as we like to call him when we go out drinking together. Because, yeah, that's a thing I totally do, is Nemesis is one of my drinking buddies. Me and Noodle and Big Nim and Pyramid Head. Yeah, we all go out to the bar every other weekend or so and just get completely hammered. We don't let weird Safe Head from The Evil Within come with us, though. He's just, once he gets into his drinks, he is just, we can't handle him. Not even Big Nim can keep a lid on Safe Head when he starts getting sloshed, so we don't invite him out anymore. Yep. Yeah, I just wrote some new life canon for me. Good stuff. We'll have to try to get Big Nim on the podcast at some point. So,
Son of a bitch.
Big Nim, are you texting me right now wanting to be on the podcast? No, it's just the stupid news app on my phone. Never mind. What a disappointment. So, we're going to be talking about the origins of Big Nim. Some of the stuff you might not know about because it doesn't appear in the games. And you got Annabelle, shut up. You gotta delve into the interviews and the art books and stuff to really find out the background info of Big Nim. So, Nemesis's only canonical appearance in the Resident Evil series is in Resident Evil 3 and Resident Evil 3 Remake. But being that Nemesis was so popular, he went on to appear in a lot of other games Project X Zone, Tekken, Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Ultimate, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. He's a very popular character despite having only one canonical appearance in the video games. So why was it that Nemesis only appeared during the Raccoon City incident? Well, to understand that, we got to go all the way back to the 1980s and see where the Nemesis project came from. So, the Nemesis project was a project that was run by Umbrella Corporation's European branch, and it was a direct competitor to Umbrella USA's Tyrant project. Both of them were trying to create bioweapons that could display a high level of intelligence to use things like military tactics and weaponry and stuff like that. So eventually, the award, as you could call it, went to the Tyrant program because it was less expensive and much easier to control rather than the Nemesis program. Now, the reason for that is that the Tyrant project used clone bodies, at least as far as I know, it used clone bodies, a mix of the T-virus and surgical augmentation to create the Tyrant super soldiers, whereas the Nemesis project used surgical alteration, the T virus, plus the Nemesis NE alpha type parasite to control the host body. Now, what exactly was the problem with the NE alpha parasite control scheme? Well, how best to put this? So, a lot of people compare the Tyrant and Nemesis to two different models of Terminators, the T-800 and the T-1000 respectively. And I think that's actually a pretty apt comparison for what we're talking about here. So in this particular instance, the Tyrant is the T-800 and Nemesis is the T-1000. So if you haven't watched at least Terminator 1 and 2, you should. They're fantastic movies. Terminator 2 is in fact my favorite movie of all time. So the Tyrant, we're going to call him Mr. X because that's the one I'm most acquainted with, Mr. X being the Tyrant Pursuer type in the Resident Evil 2 and Resi 2 remake. So, in this particular instance, the T-800 and Mr. X, they're both very simple, I guess, direct, blunt instruments. They will pursue their target, and they will take the shortest, most efficient path to acquiring and terminating the target. So, like, in the original Terminator film, the Terminator, once he arrives in the 1980s, he essentially just gets a phone book, looks up the name Sarah Connor, and just starts going down the list of Sarah Connors, eliminating them one by one to hopefully, catch the one he was actually looking for. And Annabelle, enough. Knock it off. Freaking dog. So anyway, Mr. X operates on a very similar principle. Once he acquires a target or acquires a threat to said target, he will march directly at the target and attempt to beat it to death with his bare hands. The only time we really see any kind of emotion from Mr. X is if you happen to shoot off his hat in Resident Evil Remake, in which he becomes slightly more aggressive, just kind of pissed off the fact that you shot his hat off. So that's the T-800 and the Mr. X comparison. They're both very direct, straight-lined kind of characters. And then we get to Nemesis and the T-1000. So the T-1000 is already, just upon deployment, a lot smarter than the T-800 is. He knows how to use, advanced tactics, lateral thinking, stuff like that. He'll set up ambushes and traps and stuff. Like when he loses sight of John Connor the first time, the T-1000 starts thinking to himself, all right, well, I don't know where John Connor is now, but let's see if I can't figure out where he might go, which leads him to killing and replacing John's stepmom, and then he gets outsmarted by the T-800 and John, which then leads him to attempt to do a kill and replace on John's biological mom, Sarah Connor. And this pattern continues all throughout Terminator 2. The T-1000 actually makes a lot of really good judgment calls, but he's always just that one step behind the protagonist, like when they go to see Miles Dyson in the hope of shutting down Skynet before it even gets created in the first place. Eventually, the T-1000 figures out that that's might be where they go, given what he knows about their goals, and he does arrive too late. But he's also smart enough to keep a police radio on himself to be actively listening for anything that might be John Connor and Sarah Connor. And Nemesis in Resident Evil 3 is very much the same way. He's a lot smarter than your average Tyrant. And he uses things like military weapons. Like you can see, he's got himself a rocket launcher in that there picture, which I'm also using the Ultimate Marvel 3 concept art for him because it's the best I could find. And I kind of prefer his original design to his remake design. And I'm not saying the remake design is bad. I'm just saying I like the original one better. But anyways, Nemesis does things like set up ambushes, uses high-grade military weaponry, and he does eventually start developing a personality, which is another thing he has in common with the T-1000 in Terminator 2, in that the T-1000 develops quite a bit of a sadistic streak. And especially in Remake, you can see it with Nemesis, where there's a couple of times where he actually just has Jill, dead to rights. Multiple times he could have ended Jill right then and there. But, the most famous one is when he had Jill by the head and then just tossed her away because Nemi wanted to try out his new flamethrower first. And he actively started, enjoying the hunt and eventually developed a grudge specifically against Jill. So that's the difference between the Nemesis and the standard Tyrant. So why is Nemesis's intelligence and personality a problem? Well, because that kind of makes him harder to control. Once you start really digging into like some of the more buried supplementary lore of the Nemesis, we find out that Big Nim, the one we meet in Resident Evil 3, is not actually the only Nemesis prototype out there. There's actually 4 Nemesis prototypes produced. One of them escaped confinement and killed all of his captors and had to be put down. The second Nemesis, the one we meet in Resident Evil 3, Big Nimmy, was also in danger of doing that kind of thing. Like, there's a file I think you can find in Resident Evil 3 Remake where it's essentially telling the handlers of Big Nim that be careful and don't like drop Nemesis's pod or bump it because that might wake him up, in which case he might kill you all. And we've had I think it was an interview or a Twitter post or something. One of the creators of Resident Evil 3 Remake straight up said that Big Nim actually feels and believes that humanity is beneath him, and the only reason he's actually hunting Jill during the game is because he possibly has a restraining bolt, which forces him to do so, but also he's having a lot of fun hunting Jill throughout the city, which is why he's not raising too much of a stink about being essentially restraining bolted into his objective, because he's actually excuse me, I almost sneezed. He's actually enjoying his objective. So we all know that Big Nim gets put down at the end of Resident Evil 3 via a combination of the BFG 10,000. That's what I'm going to call it, because the actual designation of the thing in the game might be considered inappropriate, and I don't want the algorithm to bury this video. But it's a combination of the BFG 10,000 and a nuclear warhead going off in Raccoon City that finally kills Big Nim. So that does leave us with... Pardon me for a second, I need to hydrate. That does leave us with a question. I said there were 4 Nemesis prototypes. One was put down when it escaped, and one died in Raccoon City. So, what happened to the other 2, I wonder? I personally think and hope that we might get some kind of answer to that in the upcoming Resident Evil 4 remake. I mean, I doubt a Nemesis is actually going to appear in Resident Evil 4, but if we get some like dialogue about it, or an optional file we can find, that'd be pretty freaking cool, honestly. I really do want to know what happened to those other 2 Nemesis prototypes. Well, anyway, that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for stopping in, listening to me ramble about a very well-loved Resident Evil monster. Leaving a like and a comment sure would be appreciated. You don't have to, though. I won't judge you if you don't. But I will see you, hopefully tomorrow, Tuesday. I'm recording this on Monday. On Tuesday, I'm hoping to get in some sunless skies. And then, we'll see how my new schedule shakes out. So, thank you for watching. And as always, shut up, Annabelle. As always, have yourself a wonderful day.